Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Patreon requested video. This one's a little bit different. It's been requested on the Patreon, but it is going to come straight out onto YouTube just due to the fact of the fight is coming up so soon. But still, I really appreciate anybody who's on the Patreon so far and anybody who's, wanting to join it. You can request any sort of fight related video, any sort of combat related video, and you can request me to do a prediction video or just give general analysis of something happening in the combat sporting world from somebody in myself who, yes, doesn't train boxing anymore, used to, but also at the same time has been to countless events, spends a lot of time studying and analysing boxing, and so I feel like I have a decent understanding, at least, a better than average understanding of boxing and the combat sporting world. And so, yeah, to kind of get into this fight is for the Alberto Puello versus Subriel Matias fight, and it's a very good fight, I think, and it's definitely a fight which is going a bit underrated in my opinion. It's a fight that is not even kind of being talked about on the Ring Free event. They're really pushing the Hamza Shiraz versus Edgar Berlanga fight, which is no real surprise that they're pushing that due to the fact of His Excellency being involved with Hamza Shiraz. But then there's also, of course, Shakur versus Zepeda, which is, a great fight and should be pushed. But this is also for a world title. It's like I say, still a great fight in my opinion as well. And I just feel like I say, it should be pushed a little bit more. And, Alberto Puello has kind of rebuilt well, I suppose, after the whole kind of drug incident. I mean, you kind of look back upon it and, it seemingly was the case that he served his ban and I mean, he kind of did what he had to do. It seemed like he was definitely pushed out and kind of discouraged by fans when he did test positive and everything like that. And it seemed like he served a bit of a ban and, there wasn't an entirety big kind of thing about it in the end, and there wasn't really much made of it, and I think people kind of moved on from it. And when Puello have started doing well again, they've kind of just accepted that this is the new Puello. And to be honest, I think Puello looks excellent at the moment and is still fighting at a very high level. So even if he was taking some sort of performance enhancing drug beforehand, I don't think it was. Maybe it wasn't on purpose, but at the same time, I don't know if it was actually significant enough to actually properly affect his ability, because like I say, I still think he is fighting very well at the moment. And I mean, I suppose arguably he's been on a good run, but he's been on a run which hasn't been convincing, I think. I mean, he beat Gary Antoine Russell, which is definitely by far the best name on his resume, and that was a big win, and it's definitely a win that has aged well. He is now the WBA champion, Russell, and now that was a good win, and that elevated him to become a world champion. And it was a close split decision win where Russell was having bits of success, but Matias fought very well. I think defensively he fought well. He was circling off the ropes well, and inevitably was able to land a lot of good shots, and pretty much was able to put on a display which was just that bit better than Russell. I mean, like I say, Russell was having success in rounds, but then Puello was always able to, just do one little thing, always able to time Russell, and seemingly the case that every single counter that he had for Russell was there to land and did land. So like I say, inevitably it was a very good performance. And then, like I say, he got elevated to then become a world champion. Then in his one and only defense in which he's had so far, he beat Sandor Martin in a close fight, and that was another split decision. So again, against the top guys, the top names on his resume, which have been two, he's had two split decisions. And a lot of people weren't really wanting to fight Sandor Martin. I know that Haney wasn't really wanting to fight him, even though he got ordered against him, and perhaps that seemingly kind of pushed Haney from wanting to not just have these lower level fights, and maybe have forced him to take these bigger fights just due to the fact that he doesn't want to take the step down to fight someone like a Sandor Martin, because Martin was a risky fight. I mean, Martin had a very close fight with Teofimo Lopez, and like I say, he's just a risky fight for anyone, and it definitely was a close fight. I think you could probably say that the Martin versus Puello fight was a closer fight than the Russell versus Puello fight. And so, it's just interesting to see that, in my opinion, was kind of how it played out. But, inevitably now Puello has cemented himself as a world champion. He's gotten himself in a great position. He's got another, this is seemingly a voluntary defense against Matias, which is, pretty insane to me that he's wanting and willing to take a voluntary defense against Subriel Matias, the guy who's knocked out every single one of his wins. It's pretty crazy to me that he's willing to do that. So you got to give him credit for that, Puello. But, Matias, of course, he has the ability to be a star. Everybody knows that. He was, a bit of a star at the time of when he was a world champion. Perhaps he was a bit overhyped due to his KO ratio. And, that's bound to happen when you have a knockout ratio that he does have. You don't really always focus too much upon who they are against. A lot of the time you can just see that and get a bit excited and, like I say, overhype a fighter. And I think Matias did have that a little bit. But, now he's a free agent. He's had a kind of similar run in his career to Puello, which I'll touch upon in a minute. But, since the loss in which he suffered to Liam Paro, which was, it was quite a close defeat. It wasn't anything too devastating for his career or anything like that. I think Paro, I've touched upon this in previous videos. I think Paro just had a really good game plan and he executed that really well. And it was just too much for Matias. And it definitely showcased that there is a route to victory against Matias. And of course, when you're facing somebody who's got this resume which is, so brutal and is just knocking everybody out, a bit like a Beterbiev at the moment as well before he fought Bivol, they do look a bit undefeatable. And, they do look like, they face this many fighters and wow, they've knocked out all of them. Can anybody be able to stand there toe to toe with them? And, now we've been shown that Paro could do that. Like I say, now there is a route to victory against Matias seemingly. And, since then though, he, like I've touched upon, has gone away and rebuilt well and, had a couple good wins. His last fight was against Velasquez and that was a very good victory for him where he got a stoppage in round 8 and he inevitably just completely beat down Vasquez. And it is interesting to see that he is getting so many stoppages, but they're just not kind of the brutal KOs. I don't really see him getting many KOs that are actual, really good knockouts. Instead, it is just continual, beating you down with these short shots, non-stop pressure, and just, like I say, improving throughout, increasing his output throughout. And yeah, that's how he kind of beats you down and inevitably, does end up stopping you. And I mean, I think there's definitely a few things which he'll have to showcase different to be able to beat something like a Puello and to showcase that he really has improved. But, like I say, I think he has gone through a similar career path to that of a Puello. I mean, he got gifted, I suppose, to an extent, a title fight when he fought Ponce for the vacant title in 2023. Of course, Taylor was ordered to face Matias and then Taylor didn't really want to do that, so he vacated. And then of course, Ponce and Taylor, who Ponce was also ordered to face Taylor as well, they ended up fighting for the vacant title. And then he was only able to defend it once against Ergashev, which at the time was seen as a good victory. But, again, that's a victory which hasn't really aged that well. And again, Ponce was seen as a good victory at the time. But Ponce, if you look at his resume, hasn't really beaten anybody of too kind of significant of a note. And, Ergashev's gone on to lose since. Ponce hasn't really gone on to do anything since. It's not, again, like I say, the best of names to have on your resume, but at the same time, a lot of people were avoiding Matias, and so you can't, discredit Matias's resume too much just due to the fact of, his resume. A lot of people didn't want to fight him when he was going and getting all these knockouts. So again, you've got to give credit to Puello for taking this fight. To speak about them both kind of a bit more individually as fighters and to speak about their attributes, Matias, he does seem to have effortless power. And, that is just something in which you can't say about many fighters. Just the fact that he can have these short shots in which he throws and just inevitably always be able to land significantly and distribute a great amount of power all over. And, like I say, it seems like these shots perhaps aren't really causing too much damage, but then more and more damage on the face of the opponents are just there, and it's visible and it's clear damage which you can see. And then you're just kind of thinking, wow, how has this happened? It's just been, just happening over time in front of your eyes, and it seems like you've just kind of been missing it, I suppose, to an extent. But like I say, it's definitely effortless power. He has a high guard for the most part. He's able to catch shots quite nicely, and he definitely doesn't respect his opponent. I think to an extent, maybe that didn't help him when he fought Paro, because I feel like he definitely should have given more so respect to Paro. But, for the most part, he doesn't respect his opponent. I think he goes around the guard with his shots very nicely and kind of pushes your guard away and then opens it up the gaps. He, like I say, shortens his shots very well. He punches all over. He wears you down. He, like I say, has an output which definitely improves throughout. He always has a slow kind of starter. And, against Valenzuela, I would give him the credit that he did actually start a bit quicker. But for the most part, he is typically quite a slow starter. And, I think his output does definitely improve throughout, and that's when your opponent gets more tired because they've started maybe a bit quicker and they're slowing down a little bit, to where Matias is just kind of getting going a bit more. He's got combos which he throws with continuous amounts of power and inevitably will be more eye-catching, and that will make this fight definitely interesting because Puello is a fighter who can counter really well, and like when he fought Gary Antoine Russell, the shots in which he was landing, which were much more eye-catching and significant than that of what Russell was landing. And Matias typically does land the shots in which are more eye-catching than most of his opponents. So again, that will be interesting to see how that dynamic works. He discourages his opponents, and when he's there and fighting more urgent, he's definitely the better fighter. When he's fighting with that bit more urgency, which I've seen in his more recent fights since the defeat, that's when he's at his best. Negatives about him, I think if he can't get into his rhythm, he won't always throw. And that's something in which, isn't realistically the best. If he loses the first couple rounds, which, like I say, normally is a slow starter, he can be made to be out of a rhythm a bit. And that's what I feel like Paro did so well. He really just put him out of his rhythm and didn't let him get going, and was either too far out of range or too close in range for him to be able to get off his best work. His defensive movement is poor, and I think he does have lazy footwork. I think he can showcase good levels of head movement when he wants to, but it's quite lazy a lot of the time. And like I say, going back to that loss against Paro, it definitely was lazy, and he stands tall, he can cross his feet, and at that point he is, a big target. He can be made to chase, and I don't think he cuts off the ring excellently, in my opinion. He can rely on power a bit too much, and just that expectation of him to just be able to get you out of there, and if he can't, then what does he do? He can kind of be staggering about a bit. He can be caught with a jab, which Puello, throws a very rangy jab. He doesn't make the necessary adjustments, and I think he can be pushed back a bit as well. He's, the shots that land upon him, they do look like they hurt, and I think that's just due to the fact of it's going to be bouncing his head back if he lands a jab. That looks like it's hurting just because it's bouncing your head back, and it seems like that was happening quite a lot by some of the weaker shots by Paro. Speak about Puello as a fighter though, like I say, I think he's got a very rangy jab, and a lot of his work is able to be from quite far away, even if it looks like it's in close, if that makes sense. His long arms means he can throw body shots from really far away and still be able to land, and then kind of be out of the way to be able to not get caught with anything else. And it's an interesting style, it's a unique body type in which he has, and it does, of course, work well for him. He can maintain a distance typically quite well, and I think he does fight his best at, a bit of a distance. I think he can fight in close well, but for the most part, I think he can put on some good work at a mid-range. He finds his range early. I think he chops to the body very well. I mean, there's been times in which you've seen combinations of him throwing to the body with his clubbing shots, and perhaps there's a few defensive vulnerabilities in the way that he throws a body shot, but they are nice. It is nice to look at, and it does look like it has an effect. He has a high guard himself. He counters well, and like I say, was countering significantly well against Russell. His punch variation is good. He's got fast hands, and perhaps faster hands than that of Matias, and he finds gaps well. He needs that space, and if he's able to gain that space, that's when he fights well. He's a southpaw, and he's going to be tricky. He's a tricky southpaw for sure. He's got the looping shots. He arguably is better on the back foot, and his defensive movement is far better than that of Matias, who, like I say, if he isn't able to cut the ring off Matias, then Puello could very easily be circling around, and that's, again, going back to that Russell fight, what he did so well in that fight. Negatives about him, I think his wide shots are definitely the thing which is quite a noticeable thing about him. I mean, Matias has these short shots which, do seem to be able to be relatively accurate, whereas Puello has these wide shots which aren't inaccurate, but if he is made to miss and Matias isn't lazy with his movement, he can be made to miss badly, and that's when he can get countered, and that's when he can get caught. He, can be willing to fight in the pocket at times, Puello, and like I say, I feel like he needs space, and I feel like that's when he does his best work, when he has that bit of space. But if Matias is able to, for the most part, cut off that space, then he might be able to have success. I think he can load up in close, Puello, and be a bit unsure of when to throw and a bit off balance when he is fighting in close. He can be caught with counters himself. I don't think Matias is a great counter puncher, but he can be caught with them, and he can be outthrown at times as well. So if Matias, his output increases, perhaps he could outthrow Puello at points, but he might leave more defensive vulnerabilities. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Alberto Puello is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. Again, like I say, I feel like we'll be able to time somebody like a Matias much better than that of how he was able to time Russell, and he did that very well, and I think Matias is going to be a big target there to be timed. I would like to see Puello start nicely on the jab, then distribute to the body, then throughout the rounds be able to get his movement going when Matias is increasing his output. Like I say, I feel like there is a game plan to be able to beat Matias now, and then like I say, be able to not get in the pocket too much. Perhaps it might happen at times. If he is fighting in the pocket at times, just try and go for counters and, again, like I say, circle off. Don't just stand in the pocket for too long. And, if you are going to be in the pocket, in Puello's case, he has to be fighting with a high guard. He can't just be coming really wide with these shots because that's when Matias is going to hurt Puello. But I think he is going to be able to get his first unanimous decision victory, his most convincing victory as a champion so far, which would be, a statement victory. I still believe, yes, Matias has lost, but it still would be a more statement victory in the way of, getting that unanimous decision for himself. And then who he could go on to fight next. I mean, Dalton Smith is waiting as a mandatory sat there, so it probably will get ordered, and it wouldn't surprise me if that does happen next. I don't know entirely if Dalton Smith is deserving of a world title shot just yet, but it probably will happen, and I'm not against it. At the same time, I love Dalton Smith as a fighter, so I'm not against it. If not, I mean, the Cruz versus Fierro rematch is happening. I feel like if Cruz was able to fight Puello, it would be such an interesting dynamic as a fight. One very rangy, tall fighter against one compact, short fighter. That could make for a fun fight if Cruz gets through Fierro. Or Hitchens, of course, IBF champion. That could be made to happen with His Excellency being involved, and I feel like that could be a good contest as well. But yeah, we will have to wait and see. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like video if you did, like video, subscribe if you're new. Feel free to join the Patreon, and thanks for watching.